Hello,
Hello,
and welcome to the Cookbook Circle podcast. I'm Hannah,
and I'm Victoria.
and we've set out to review the UK's most popular cookbooks, those that you probably have at home and haven't opened in a while. We take one cookbook each episode to cook from and to stress test, digging out their best recipes, bringing them to life again, and hopefully inspiring you to do so too.
We collected and collated as many of the best cookbook lists as we could find online to make a definitive rundown of the most popular. Each podcast will take one of these books, cook some of the recipes, and share our thoughts with you. And this time it's
How to Eat by Nigella Lawson, published for the first time in 1998. Some facts that you mightn't have known about Nigella. So her father was Nigel Lawson, Conservative Chancellor, and her mother was Vanessa Salmon, socialite. Apparently we still use that word. Nigella studied medieval and modern languages at Oxford. It's easy to forget that she was a journalist, actually. I feel like I knew that once, but I'd completely forgotten. She began a restaurant column in The Spectator in 1985 and then became literary editor of the Sunday Times. And that's where she met her husband, John Diamond. They got married 3 years later in Venice. And then apparently suggested that she write a cookbook with a title of Classic Simplicity, and that's how to eat was born. There's kind of an interesting contrast of the title with Delia Smith's How to Cook, which Nigel Slater mentions in his ode to Nigella in the 20th anniversary piece in OFM, in the fact that this is a book that's about meals, it's not about recipes, which I think she kind of brings in the preface, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And says, I'm not a chef. I love that. When you Google Nigella and this book, there are so many academic papers that speak about Nigella and the role of feminism and domesticity. That's an easy word to say. And one of them was really interesting. It was called Feminism, Domesticity. There we go again. Domesticity, there's a T in there. And Popular Culture by someone called Lee Shapiro Sanders. And she's got a whole chapter called Consuming Nigella, which explores feminism in food culture through Nigella. She says she's a cross between Sophia Loren and Debbie Reynolds in pink cashmere cardigan and a fetching gingham apron. But that she argues that all of this is done with irony, and that irony wouldn't exist without people like Martha Stewart and Delia Smith. Basically, you could just write a whole dissertation on Nigella and the role that she's had to play in food and feminism. Especially, I think it was quite a male-heavy time, male chef-heavy back when this would have come out.
Yeah, and she is so unapologetically feminine. It works for her, and it pays the bills in an extraordinary way, and in a way that I don't think any other female chef before, obviously, or since has quite dominated the market in that sense.
Yeah, it's really true. So this book is widely regarded as a classic. Rave reviews. The Sunday Telegraph called it the most valuable culinary guide published this decade. January magazine called it almost biblical. She won Author of the Year at the 2001 British Book Awards. I think she'd had a couple of more by then, but it certainly contributed. And did you know Nigella turned down an OBE?
Oh, I didn't know that. What was her reasoning? Does she have reasoning?
She didn't give one. It's very mysterious. She's one of the few people that have turned one down but haven't given a reason. But anyway, what do you think of that book?
It's giant.
Mm-hmm.
I think because it doesn't have pictures, it means you don't flick through and kind of pick a couple of things that maybe you'll cook later on. You have to kind of start at the beginning and work through. And of course, you don't have to read every single word because it's 2020 and there's meals for 8 people in there. And I haven't seen 8 people in a room since February. But is it beautifully written? Yes. And I can understand why it's a classic. The minute you start reading it, it's timeless as well. I think particularly for quote unquote British cooking, which I don't really know what that is, and I don't really think it exists, but it certainly is. I think, it definitely deserves what people say about it. The thing that you talk about Nigel Slater, because it feels almost like a Nigel Slater book. There's just this beautiful prose, and it's kind of a non-fiction book with recipes, which I think is how I would describe all of Nigel Slater's books.
Absolutely. It's hard sometimes to pick out the recipes. Like there are massive bodies of text, and then there's just kind of almost side notes in the margin that there's a recipe in there somewhere. And sometimes it's not even a recipe. It's just like there's one section that it says good tomato sauce. And then you look in the text and it just says buy the best tomato sauce. Okay. Yeah. The first night I got it, I just brought it to bed as a bedtime reading. It feels like something you need to kind of, excuse the pun, digest and kind of work through and like pull out what you want to cook them. But it's extensive.
Yeah, there's a really beautiful, and I wanted to read it on this, our first podcast, in there that I felt it kind of was quite poignant for our first podcast and what she's saying. So it's on page 4, so she's very much the introduction. And she says, in literature, teachers talk about key texts. They exist too in cooking. That's what I mean by basics. Everyone's list of basics is, of course, different. Your idea of home cooking, your whole experience of eating, colours, your sense of what food should be included in the culinary canon. Cooking, indeed, is not so very different from literature. What you have read previously shapes how you read now. And so we eat, and so we cook. And I just thought, firstly, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so true. And it felt a little bit like exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Which is to help people and ourselves not just run to the nearest trendy book that is out and costs £40. Yeah. But, you have the cookbooks that you have for a reason. Let's figure out what you can do for the food you like within them.
Yeah. I mean, that plays into everything she preaches and still does about kind of flexibility of recipes as well, in that you don't have to follow her recipes to the letter, that you can sub stuff in, you sub in what you have at home, what you feel like. And that's one of the things I love about her. Like even recently with the latest book, she has been playing around with a fish finger thing and putting the banana skin in the curry. And yeah, of course, that's left field for a lot of people, but it's just based on what she actually wants to eat or what she has at home. And there's no snobbery there at all.
Yeah. And I think that still now what she's doing, more than 20 years later, is like, she's not ashamed to borrow and say, oh, I got this. Even on, the introduction to her new show in 2020 is, there's this journalist on Twitter that I read this.
Yeah.
I read a recipe from her home cooking, and it's not home cooking for me. And she does that all the way through this book. She's like, my friend, this person, or, she's always referencing other chefs and friends and cooks. And I think that's, again, goes back to her not being full of ego and just being able to, who I enjoy to cook. And of course, I'm going to take influence from whoever I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. It's more to just kind of bring everything together in one place. I agree with that review of it as being almost biblical. It is. And the amount of work, the sheer amount of work that must have gone into this is insane. So
yeah, it's a
kudos.
It's a lifetime of work. The fact that she's written a book after it is ridiculous. I think I'd just retire.
Do you think that her level of innuendo and kind of sensuality has ramped up since then, or do you think the beginnings of it are in here? I feel.
Yeah, there was something I cooked, which we'll come on to, that I've underlined. It's the only thing in the whole book I've underlined and put exclamation marks next to, and it's about. Well, I'll tell you what it is first, and maybe you can figure out what it's about. I love this combination of cold, thickly, nutty, buff-coloured paste and hot, lemony sweet shards of meat.
Oh my God. Wow.
I mean, that's why I made it, obviously. Hot shards of meat, buff-coloured. I feel like the innuendo is rife.
There's a nice veggie version of that, of your shards of meat, when she's talking about making a mushroom sandwich, and you can like picture it in the show, right, where she's standing in the kitchen and she's always standing and eating, and she talks about how you bite into this mushroom sandwich and the juices are like running down your arms and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but I love it. I mean, there's nothing that I don't love about Nigella, I'll be perfectly honest.
Should we talk about what we actually cook?
Yes, you gave a little hint.
So I think it is testament to this book, excuse the pun, as we're talking about biblical tomes. There was so much I wanted to cook. And I got like a long list of things I wanted to cook, and then I had to put it to my husband to see what he actually would eat if I cooked. So because I couldn't not do it, I did the Coca-Cola ham because I feel like it's a classic of the Nigella genre, and I've never done it before.
Yeah.
But I felt like I couldn't only do that. So I did do buff-coloured paste and hot shards of meat, which is hummus and seared lamb, if you didn't guess already. And then I did her fancy cake.
Yes. Oh my God. How was that? Did you like the cake? Was it fancy?
It was fancy. I bought, you have to make it in a brioche mold, which I have to admit I didn't know what it was until I Googled it, and I presumed it was like a brioche tin, like a loaf tin.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
Oh.
It's the big flourishy, looks like a flower thing. Yeah, but I bought a fairly cheap one, and the cake was great. It's like a lemony, it's completely gluten-free as well because there's no flour, it's just almonds and eggs and sugar. It was incredibly easy to do as well. I do have a KitchenAid, so you kind of have to whisk the egg whites up until they're stiff.
Wait.
So, and my only, like, I guess, question about it, I had this down to ask you actually, as you are the patisserie chef amongst us. As you know, a brioche mold is this kind of big, tall, kind of bowl shape.
Yeah.
It looks like if you, like a flan mold, but like tall. So she makes reference to how you couldn't make a Victoria sponge in one of those. But then I was thinking, could you make this fancy cake in a smaller cake tin?
Definitely. I think she probably, or from what I remember, I think she just does it because of the shape. So I think you could do it in any kind of tin you want, but it's just probably less visually appealing. But there's no reason. The only reason I can think of is if the tin is, especially to help it rise, because there's a cake, an American recipe called, I think it's angel food cake or angel cake. And that has loads of whipped egg whites. And did you say this one does too?
Yeah, it is. There is a lot of volume of cake mix.
And you need a certain material of the tin to help it rise. But I mean, either way, I remember when I made that, I used like a silicone bundt tin and it worked fine. So I think it would be okay.
Yeah, I suppose anything quite tall. Because, like I said, it is a lot of volume. So a bundt tin would be also fine. But it was great. And she writes about a syrup that she had in a cake like this in the restaurant Morrow, I think. And I didn't make the syrup because it included boiling 10 clementines or something, and I don't have time for that. But it was perfect as it was, just with some icing sugar and lemon zest on top. It was great. I loved it. My husband does not like cake, really, but he went back for more. I know. I apologize for him.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, he went back for more. Yeah. And so I thought that, again, is testament to it.
What about your hunky meat?
Yeah, my my hot chunks of meat. So the hummus and lamb was great. It was perfect. It was exactly like the kind of lamb chopped hummus that you would get in a Lebanese or a Turkish restaurant, which I absolutely love. The hummus is a bit of a labor of love. It took, almost 2 days because she requests that you soak the beans.
And you did?
I did. I soaked them for 37 hours or something and then cooked them for another 2.
And I never do that. I always I glaze over when I see that and I get the tins. So yeah, props.
I would say the payoff is worth it. Like they did taste amazing, and it makes you feel really chefy when you finally have soaked them. You've spent 30 whatever hours waiting, and you finally go to soak them, and you get to put like a whole onion and bay leaves and like whole garlic in the water to cook them. I felt very much like, I should be on some kind of MasterChef at that point. But no, it was great. That my only thing. So I made 2 batches of the hummus because you have 300 grams of chickpeas, which is a lot. And I don't have a food processor, but I have one of those kind of mini blenders things, which worked fine. But I just did 2 batches. But she requests that you put yogurt in with the hummus mix. Yeah, and I wasn't convinced about that. So I did half and half.
Half and half. Okay, yeah. That is bordering on sacrilegious.
Yeah, and she does make a note of that. She just kind of says, well, it's the way I do it. And I wasn't sure, but what it led to, the half of it with yogurt in tasted just a lot more mild than it was, a lot kind of creamier. They were both really lovely and creamy because, you know, they've cooking water and they have tahini and oil and all that good stuff. But it was creamier and it was just a milder taste. And I wasn't totally convinced about it, but I came back to it a day or so later. And once the kind of flavors had even developed in the fridge, I rated it with the yogurt, but I wouldn't do it again with the yogurt.
Did you notice that she suggests adding creme fraiche, cream or yogurt again to horseradish? Yeah, no. I'd love yogurt and sour cream and all those things. And I think they're great for mellowing out spicy stuff. But for hummus or horseradish, I like that flavour. I don't want it to be more mellow.
Yeah, but that's it.
How do you cook the lamb then to put on the hummus?
It's literally just you get lean lamb. I got some lamb steaks and you just cut it up as small as possible and then fry it in some oil until it goes kind of crispy and charred. So I have a raw cast iron pan, which I love like my firstborn child. And I used that because I thought that would probably pick up some of the seasoning and then we got some Turkish bread to go with it from a shop down the road from here. And it was great. You're supposed to put toasted pine nuts on the top as well, but the only pine nuts I could find were 9 Great British pounds. And I don't know if this is for sort of Brexit or whatever, but I'm not going to pay £9 for a bag of pine nuts. So what did you cook?
It's a fabulous book, amazing guide to anyone who wants to learn how to cook.
I know what's coming.
But it is not that friendly for ye old vegetarians. So, I mean, there are definitely things in there, and she definitely references veggie things, but it's a little bit harder to rifle out the veggie stuff, especially the mains or the savory things. So, all the kind of ones that I had my eye on were very simple recipes, but ones I mightn't have cooked to like using a recipe. So I made the pea risotto for one, which I don't think I've used a recipe for risotto for a while. And it's actually really interesting to go back and do it to the letter again and see that it's way better. I've basically been butchering it all along. But I also made, just because I'm a goody two-shoes that way, I made the lemon curd and also these pistachio biscuits, which I'll come back to, but they were delightful.
Okay, talk us through the pea risotto. Was it difficult? Because risotto is also always, I think, seen as this like difficult kind of project cook that nobody can get right.
It's not difficult. It's just needy, you know. You just have to stand there and keep stirring and ladling in stuff. But it's not like technically very difficult. And what's nice about this one, if I had made a pea risotto before, I would have really lazily had like the pot of hot stock, onion and rice and wine and all that stuff. And I would put the peas into the stock and then I would ladle that stock into the rice. But by the end, those peas are like cooked beyond submission and they vaguely resemble a pea.
Like grey.
Yeah, they are so mushy. Whereas with this one, he tells you to cook some peas off in a pan and then you take away half and you add some stock to the ones that are left in the pan with some parmesan and you blitz it into like a pea puree, basically.
Oh.
Yeah, which is really yummy. And then you cook your risotto as normal, you put in the rice, you put in some wine, and then you start the ladling in of the stock and just kind of stirring it all till it's absorbed. And then you only put the peas that you set aside in like quite a bit later because they're kind of already semi-cooked. You've cooked them in butter already. And then at the end, you start with the pea puree. So it's all really fresh and everything's just cooked really well. There's like a nice bit of nutmeg in there, which I think is a little bit of a game changer in there with peas. It works really well to just kind of give some, I don't know, warmth. And yeah, loved it. It was great. It kind of made me rethink risotto and how I haven't been doing a great job all this time.
Sounds amazing. Did you have to find fresh peas?
No, she recommends using frozen petit pois.
Oh,
of course.
great.
But I had like 3 bags of regular peas in the freezer, so I just used them. Yeah, would recommend it. For that recipe is for 2 people, which I feel is just right. Like comfort, cheesy, warming, delicious.
But you feel like it's good enough to it's not just about the cheese. I feel like sometimes recipes for risotto are just make this mushy rice thing and then put loads of cheese on top and it'll be fine.
No, I know what you mean, and I'm okay with that. But this one is not that. It's very fresh and springy tasting. So no, I think it's like a solid revisiting of a classic.
Love it. What about your biscuits? Let's talk about your sweet treat.
So these are they were called like pistachio kipferls.
Okay.
That means crescent, apparently. But I have made before these vanilla versions of these from Rachel Allen's big book.
Are they vanilla flavored or just non-sexual?
Oh yeah, look at you getting on, Nigella. She reads one book once.
Are we calling non-Nigella recipes vanilla now?
No, They are vanilla flavored with like ground almonds or ground hazelnuts. Basically, you just dredge them in icing sugar when they're warm out of the oven, and they're really crumbly and quite simple and delicious. So these are basically very like that. Instead of using hazelnuts or almonds, you use pistachios, which in my mind are one of the superior nuts. I don't know if you would agree.
Top nuts. No, yeah, I love them.
It's up there with pecans. Any peanut, basically.
What about peanuts?
Peanuts are I forgot that peanuts were actually a thing in their own right. Peanuts, pistachios, pecans, pine nuts. I think we could firmly agree that the superior range. But yeah, what's good about these is that they're not very sweet. They're quite salty, actually. You do put a little pinch of salt in. Basically, you toast the pistachios, grind them all up, grind them, cream some butter, mix in some icing sugar and flour, and then pinch of salt and the ground pistachios, and then you roll them into like little half spoons, and then you bake them, and they're really quick. They're only like 10-15 minutes, and then you dust them with icing sugar when they're warm, which means they kind of go that nice. They become like a proper coating. It's not just like dust that's gonna like evaporate when you breathe on them. Love breathing on biscuits. But it's a proper coating. They'd probably be quite a nice edible gift.
And they look beautiful too. I mean, everyone can see your pictures on Instagram, but yeah, they look presentable.
Thanks.
I did.
I want to please presentable biscuits. No, they are. They're cute. I also think you could probably dip them in a little bit of chocolate if you're feeling fruity.
I see. Apart from the lemon curd that you're going to tell us about now, you just made green things. So you needed another colour. Pea risotto, pistachio biscuits.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I mean, neither of which are particularly healthy. Lemon curd, I mean, I love a lemon curd. Have you ever made it at home before?
I have never made it.
Do you like the jarred stuff?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever buy it in a jar because I wouldn't know what to do with it. I have a jar still of ginger curd in my cupboard and I've got no idea what to do with it. And I look at it and think I should use that.
Yeah, this is about your butter thing, that you don't like butter. That's the problem here.
I mean, there's no need to out me so soon in this podcast as someone who doesn't like butter. Like, how can I talk about food and not like butter?
You could definitely talk about food. But I'll take the butter and cheese. You take the meat. It's all good. Yeah, no, because for me, curd is the best on toast with lots of butter. This curd recipe is kind of buttery as well. It's a pretty classic recipe. You kind of heat sugar, eggs, extra egg yolks, butter, lemon juice, lemon zest, and that's it. And you just keep kind of slowly heating it, not scrambling it, because that would be very gross. And yeah, my one gripe, and it's not particularly with Nigella, but it's every chef that writes a recipe for lemon curd, is they always say just cook it until it looks like lemon curd. And it looks like lemon curd pretty early on because it's kind of yellow and liquidish. But you have to be kind of brave and take it a bit further than you want to in order not to have like a runny mess. I feel like the warnings are so frequent and loud about you curdling the mixture or making sweet scrambled eggs, basically, that people just become so afraid that they're put off.
And it feels like a waste, but you don't want to waste food.
No.
And, eggs, so many eggs.
It is a lot of eggs. It makes quite a lot of curd, actually. It makes a couple of jars worth.
But also a good thing for presents, right? You gave it as presents.
Yes, I gave it to our very kind neighbour who donated her Wi-Fi password, which is like the millennial equivalent of like pulling me out of a river.
Lending you a cup of sugar.
Yeah, exactly. So she got some, and I don't know what she thought of it, though. She could be lying dead next door. That's terrible. Sorry. If you're listening, neighbour, I really hope you're okay.
So do you have any of the recipes in the book that you wish you had made or that you will go back and make because it's a book we have now?
I would make did you see the Irish tart tatin?
No.
I'm being extra Irish by saying tart tatin. But it's the rhubarb one with a scone/scone base.
I did see it. Yeah, I thought that sounded great. I was excited because I love tart tatin, but it's not rhubarb season.
No.
I walked away.
Yeah, totally fair. And the thing that I would make again, if I had to pick one, actually, I didn't make it this time, but it's like one of my first cooking memories, not my first cooking memories because I was like a teenager, but I remember watching Nigella's TV show with my mum in our pajamas on the weekend morning, I think. And she makes like a giant Yorkshire pudding in the baking tray. And then she just puts like mascarpone and like, I can't remember if it's syrup or honey on there. And
Wow.
yeah, it's decadent. I remember watching that and my mum and I realized that we had all the ingredients. We made it in the morning and ate it for like basically brunch. And it was insanely good. And that was in this book. And I didn't realize that until we started looking at it again. So that is something that I would definitely love to make again because it was fucking delicious.
That is beautiful. I love that memory.
Yeah. Was there anything that you were missing that you wish you could have made?
So we are talking now and it is late November. And so we are getting into kind of Christmas feelings. And she does have a whole Christmas section, which is quite a traditional. There's lots of, planning the day in terms of cooking your roast and things like that. But I've seen this before and I always wanted to make it, but her clementine cake.
Yeah.
I would love to try and make. I know it's probably on, if when you have your Food Network on over Christmas, you have a clementine or two, I don't know, and you just boil them down for like 4 hours or something. And then you kind of put that whole clementine all blended up into your cake mix. And I just think I love clementines. I live for Christmas when they're just perfect. And I think I'd love that. So I would like to try it. And I probably will this Christmas because I've got a lot more time on my hands and it sounds amazing.
Yeah, those ones are so good. I've made one like that before with oranges. And I think is it ground almonds, this one, or is it polenta or something? I think that one might be gluten-free.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's very before its time with all these gluten-free recipes.
There's a lot that's before its time, I think. There's a lot of like miso stuff in here as well and like Japanese inspired recipes.
And that's all in the low fat section. I noticed that like the low fat section is basically miso with everything.
Yeah, that's so true, actually. But also, this is when, yeah, we do love. I think this book was one of the reasons why goose fat became so like readily available in supermarkets. I remember her recommending using it as the fat for roast potatoes. And I think that she might be, I think she's definitely the reason why that started to become more of a thing. And kind of like Potleggy, and like he takes the credit for having that are available in a lot of shops. I think Nigella did the same thing for good old goose fat.
Fun fact.
That is not a fact. That is me declaring something as fact that is not necessarily true. Okay, so you would make the clementine cake. Anything else?
Lots of things. Pasta and anchovy sauce.
Mm.
I would love to make, because I am endlessly trying to recreate this pasta dish thing that I had in Japan once that was very anchovy heavy, and I've never been able to do it, and I'm hoping that might fill the void.
Ooh.
And also on my list was the beef stroganoff, because firstly, beef stroganoff's great, and secondly, anytime I make it, I feel like I learn something, and secondly, I feel like I'm in Julia and Julia, or whatever that film is called.
Yeah.
And I'm, a true domestic goddess. And I would absolutely, I didn't really talk about it, but I would absolutely make the Coca-Cola ham again. It was spectacular. And I'm not going to talk about it too much because everybody's made it. Everyone knows it's delicious. It's iconic, but it really, really is.
Wow. How much Coke do you use?
Shitloads.
Really?
Yeah. So I had a tiny ham, it was 1.4 kilograms. And the recipe says to use 2 kilograms of ham and 2 liters of Coke. So I got in that same ratio.
Yeah.
So 1.5 liters of Coke, and it wasn't enough. We only have Diet Coke in the house, so I added another Diet Coke and then some water, and then it still wasn't quite enough. And it's just not particularly pleasant, looking or smelling thing as you go through the boiling it in Coke. But it's great. And the glaze that she puts on it has breadcrumbs and mustard. And when you're making the glaze, it looks like Christmas cake, which is quite funny, and it kind of messes with your head. But then it's great. Obviously, we ate it for days. So I would absolutely make that again. I'd be interested in making a much bigger ham and seeing if we liked it, in that kind of Christmas table, presented ham. Whereas we kind of pulled it all apart and had it in sandwiches and stuff because it all kind of fell apart. So we didn't slice it how that you would imagine it to be. But I would like to try it to see if it was that big. But I don't have a pot that big I don't have enough money for the sugar tax to pay for that much Coke.
That must feed quite an amount of people then, that 2 kilo ham. If you go that way. When
I bought it at the shop, there was a 2 kilo or just over 2 kilo ham, and I picked it up and I was like, I just can't justify cooking this, for what? Yeah. As delicious as it was, we would have been sick of it by the end.
Oh, you would have got the ham sweats.
Yeah, and nobody needs those.
It's oozing like salt and Coke.
One hilarious little mistake I noticed in the hummus recipe for my hummus and lamb was that when she's talking about bringing everything together, so you've cooked the chickpeas, you've got your tahini, you've got your olive oil, you've got everything ready to put into the blender. She does not mention putting the chickpeas into the blender. She mentions all the other ingredients, and I've read it 4 or 5 times, and not once does she say put the chickpeas into the blender. She says put everything else.
Oh my god.
I used my initiative and I put the chickpeas in. But I did think that was hilarious.
How many poor souls do you think cook their bloody chickpeas for how many hours? 36 hours. They make them and forget to put them in the bloody blender. They sit down, eat some tahini paste with their lamb, and they're like, something's missing.
He's talking about it being lovely and creamy and smooth, and they're like, well, what do I do with the chickpeas that I've spent 2 days making?
Oh, that's quite funny.
So this book featured on a number of lists. There as Observer Food Monthly, Times, Telegraph, Vogue, loads. It was very much in the top kind of 5 or 6 when we collated all these lists. Hannah, do you believe it deserves a spot at the top of the kind of best UK cookbooks of all time?
Yes, I 100% do. I definitely think it's like a manual. It's like a manual for not just food, but possibly life. Full of wisdom.
The 50th anniversary cover.
I'm looking for a quote on there, basically. I'm hoping to make the big time. But it's, it's amazing. And it's just, maybe if someone's going to university, or they've decided to just get into food more, I feel like this is the perfect thing to have on your bookshelf to just like browse through. And even if you just don't cook from it. So for me, it is definitely worthy of a place on the list.
I do agree. Yeah. I think it feels like, a Bible. We've said it a number of times now. I think you could also easily give it to a parent as well, as someone who doesn't want to go and get all these, miso and za'atar and all this stuff. There's none of that in there. It's very accessible, things that you'd have at your local shop, no matter where you are. I think it's great. I think it's also good in terms of you can have it on your Kindle, for example. You don't need to have this giant book in your house because it doesn't have any pictures. So you're not losing out on anything if you don't have it in physical form, which feels like a novelty in the cookbook game. So the Cookbook Circle rating, for those of you who don't know, which is all of you right now, includes a cookbook's usability, accessibility. So are the recipes easy to read? Are they easy to follow? How much knowledge do they take? What about the ingredients? Are they, like I was just saying about, would you have them to hand? Do you have to go out of your way? Do you have to omit ingredients? Because it's important with books, aesthetics, I think, also need to be part of our ratings because, we have to judge books by their cover because they're cookbooks.
And not just the cover, but the font, I think, is supremely important. There are many people who will disagree with me, but I love a good font.
So no books written in Comic Sans, please, for the Cookbook Circle.
It is the most fun font, but no, it doesn't have a place here.
And then the most important metric, of course, is how veggie friendly they are.
I'm sorry. I am sorry.
For our veggie friends.
I do feel like I have to stick that in there because there are so many books. Just because you're vegetarian doesn't mean you don't love food. And there are so many books that are top of the chart. Great, but how much of it am I actually going to be able to cook? So I'm putting my foot down.
It's important.
It's going in.
So, Hannah, out of 5 Nigella innuendos, how many innuendos would you give this book?
I would give this, surprisingly, given that it's not necessarily meeting all of the criteria, i.e. the veggie-friendly criteria, because there is only a small percentage of these, as I've said. I would give this a luscious, buff-coloured 5 out of 5. I'm going there.
5? She's going there.
I am. First episode. Wow. I'm sorry. I might set the bar too high, but how can you just can't. You can't deny the amount of work that's gone into this and how extensive and lovingly written it all is. So I'm saying it. 5 innuendos out of 5. And Victoria, how many Nigella innuendos are you giving this?
I'm not going to give it 5 innuendos. I don't. I mean, I'll be real with you. Like you said, it's not veggie friendly. I also, don't think aesthetically it's as beautiful as it could be. It doesn't have pictures. I keep going on about pictures. I'm actually an adult. I can read, and I do. But clearly, aesthetics are more important to me than I thought prior to this. So I'll be talking to my therapist about that this week.
You know what else doesn't have pictures?
What?
The Bible. And people like that book.
I think I would give How to Eat and the Bible 3 innuendos out of 5. 3 innuendos out of 5.
Oh my God. You're a tough little pistachio cookie, Victoria. That is bordering on sacrilegious, but I'm going to let you away with that.
I'm sorry, and I wouldn't say it to Nigella's face, so I'll take it back if she listens and go 4.
It's just a ruthless ploy to make her tweet us. We'll take what we can get. Okay, so on average, it's a 4 out of 5.
It's a 4, which is great.
Sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Is this how it's going to go? Am I going to be the good cop and you're going to be the bad cop? I think this might be setting a precedent.
When it comes to Nigella, I think you are including the person that Nigella is.
Yes.
I am judging the art, not the artiste. And you, so I think that's what's happened here. You have looked beyond its flaws to give it a 5 out of 5. And I have isolated the book. I give Nigella and her body of work 5 innuendos out of 5. But,
Nice.
but this book in particular, for me, it is not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm guilty as charged. You're absolutely right. I just can't. I can't separate the people from the books. And I think this may be an issue that will arise again and again with certain chefs who are yet to be named, but who also appear in our ultimate list. And I will expect you to hold me to account on that.
And I shall do so. And you, who knows?
I think I'm just too nice.
What chefs I will defend to the death, and you you will fight me on.
You're the baby. I'm just like a Labrador puppy about all chefs and have no objectivity whatsoever. Okay, that's it.
That's it. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for listening.
We're back next time.
See you next time.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Cookbook Circle. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and let us know what you think by leaving a review. You can see how the recipes from this episode turned out on our Instagram @Cookbook Circle. And if you make anything from the books that we talk about, please don't forget to tag us. We'll see you next time.